secrets of Moshe's birthday. We said that after a long look at this matter, it looks like Adar on its own is sort of the weakest of all the months, right? When Haman looked through, he tried to find, couldn't find a schus in the month, he couldn't find a schus in the mazel. So our question was, how did it get so great that it becomes the strongest of all months? We said that its mazel is bari v'takif, mazle, it's like strong and healthy. So we said that because Moshe was born in this month, and the Indian of a birthday is mazalo gaver, that your mazel gets strong. And since the Jewish people and Moshe are one, because the nasi hu hakol, the nasi is basically all the people and all of everything. So therefore, the Jewish people all were born, in a sense, on this month. And therefore we said, what happens on a birthday when a person has his mazel is gover? And this is a kind of a new insight into the way the birthday works. We actually kind of stumbled onto the similar idea in the class this morning from Basi Lagani, which I'll tell you what we said over there, whoever was in the morning class. We said that there's this idea within inside of a person where sometimes you could be called Adam, and sometimes you can be called Lo Adam. There's an aspect of us which is sort of beyond man. Like it says, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker v'lo yinachem ki lo Adam hi linachem. The Netzach of Yisrael, which represents God, his eternality, and also the quality of eternality inside of us, it's called Netzach, eternal. It says, Lo yinachem, lo yishaker, lo yinachem. It doesn't change. The part of us which is Adam is kind of flimsy. The part of you which is Adam is 10 spheros, and they're not eternal, right? Sometimes you go right with chesed, sometimes you go left with gevura, sometimes you change your mind, change your reasons, you're like a mess over there. Adam represents sort of the changing world of sheker. But there's a possibility that you can tap into your lo Adam hi, the aspect of you which is sort of your essence of your soul. And when you do so, you can actually take the essence and it dominates the Adam part of you. And it makes the Adam, which is normally an aspect of change, into something permanent and ready for Mesiras Nefesh and unwieldy. And this is sort of a metaphor of the whole purpose of creation. Adir b'tachtonim, Hashem wants that this Alma de Shikra, this world of Sheker, right, will nonetheless stay a world of Sheker, but be like overtaken by the Kedusha. And this is the idea of sort of a Mishkan, that from Atzei Shiti, right, and the Indian of Shtus and the changing folly of the world, you could turn it into a permanent dwelling place of Hashem. What's the idea here? Is that the force of God can actually overtake the force of the world and turn it into something godly and transform it into something godly. And this is really the concept of what a birthday is. And from a birthday, we'll see also what the birthday of all the Jewish people are in the month of Adar, that on a birthday, the idea is that your mazel takes over the particular mazel of that day. Who's ever in the kitchen, come join us, or shh, right? And the idea of the day has a mazel, right? But the fact that you're born on that day, it takes the mazel of that day due to your mazel of you, and it like moves the mazel of the day in your direction. So your mazel is gover. It means it like basically overtakes whatever natural forces there are, and it makes them go in your direction. Much like Purim and like sort of like taking over the lottery and making it go in the direction of the Jew. So too the whole month of Adar, right? And also we had a question. Fine, Purim is a good day, but why does it say that when the Jewish people celebrate Purim, it turned the whole month into a month of joy? Because it says Mishanichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. Why would Mishanichnas? Maybe when Moshe was born, maybe Purim. Why already on Rosh Chodesh? Because the Jewish people's mazel, which is Moshe Rabbeinu's mazel, entered into the month of Adar. It took over the whole month of Adar, which in principle was the weakest of all the months. It didn't have a schus, it didn't have a mazel, and it like just took it and organized it to go in our way. What's that? Because we said Haman looked through all the months, and it didn't. We didn't have until Purim came along. It didn't have a holiday. It didn't have a schus for us, and the fish mazel. We never were able to make much out of that for ourselves, right? Because it says the fish mazel is that dagim, right? They can swallow, but they can also be swallowed. And we couldn't find in the Torah that there was something particularly that went in the Jewish direction just from the month of Adar alone. But now, the whole month of Adar, starting already from the beginning, was taken over by Moshe's mazel, which is the mazel of the Jewish people. Therefore, became like doubly good, just like the Mishkan. It took the shtus or the Adam, like we said a second ago, and turned it into something of Elokus. Therefore, we find not only is Adar is now improved, it doesn't just negate the bad parts, but it actually makes it greater than all the other months. And we started to say, how do we see that it's actually, in fact, greater than all the other months? First of all, it's the only month that has 60 days, right? It's the only month that can sort of be doubled. And the whole idea of doubling is like double the good. And we said that this idea that it can be doubled also is functionally what happens when you double the month of Adar. You equate it with the days of the solar year, right? The lunar year we said has less days. But when you add an extra month of Adar, you either equate it with the solar year, or it can even take over the number of days in the solar year. And that idea of equating the solar year with the lunar year has all kinds of messianic ramifications, because it reminds us of this notion of the Shnei Ma'oros HaGedolim, that when Hashem created the world, the sun and the moon were equal, and that represented like the Shekhinah B'Tachtonim in this highest level. So Adar was not only negating the evil, but multiplying the good in new and impressive ways. So that's what we said yesterday, more or less. And we'll take it from page 333. We also find this notion of the top of the second column, where it says a base. Actually, I don't know if we did the Aleph. Let's do the Aleph. So we said, Kama pratim bezeh. This notion of having a doubled month, there's a few details on it. He brings 3 different points. Aleph, Adar in a Shnas Ha'ibor, in a leap year, has 2 months. The Chiddush of the Molad HaLevana, Sheromas al Chiddush the Yisrael who ba'ofen the Kaflaim L'Tushia. So the whole notion that there's 2 Rosh Chodeshes. The Rosh Chodesh itself is already the idea of Asidim Lischadesh Kamosa. It says we will be renewed like the moon. So the whole a presence of a new moon is basically the renewal of the Jewish people. And in this month, there's a potentially for a double renewal, which is this notion of Kaflaim L'Tushia, which means a double measure of salvation. Second point, Adar in a double year, there's 60 days, which also hints to this Indian of Bitul Bashishim, right? Hanu the Nesinas Koach the Bitul Kol and Yanim Bilti Ritzoim. So it has this quality, which is the month of Adar is able to negate all negative things, but not just negate them. Our point is that it does more than just negate. It's also Hafichasam Latov. It turns negative things into good things. We're learning, a bunch of guys here learning Tairuvos and Isur Beheter. What happens when you bittul something b'shishim, right? Now, you take something which would have normally been asur and becomes mutter. Ad sheroim lachilasem shel Yisrael lios dam ubasar k'psaram. You take something which would have been asur, and it becomes fitting to be eaten by a Jew and transformed into flesh and blood, like food is. As it says in the Tanya, we said just a couple of days ago in the Tanya, that there's 2 types of delights that Hashem has from the world. There's certain delights from tzaddikim and certain from beinonim. What's the delights of tzaddikim are compared to sweet foods, right? They're just good, l'chatchila, never wrong, a little piece of candy. But there's even like a deeper pleasure, which is called the beinoni, who has a yetzer hara, and yet he's transforming it to good by not letting it get to him. And this is what's called dvarim charifim or chamutzim. This is like sharp or sour things. Rak shehem metubali, but they become sweetened, umetukanim and heitev ad shenasu ma'adanim lahashiva nefesh, to the point that they become delicacies, and they're actually more like of a sophisticated delicacy. Quite frankly, it's a better pleasure when you sweeten something bad than when you just have something sweet to begin with. And therefore, the notion of therefore he's basically saying that the pleasure from a beinoni who has a yetzer hara to Hashem is even greater in a sense than the sweetness of the tzaddikim. And this is all hinted to in the month of Adar, where it nullifies negative things and turns them into good because of this quality of bitul b'shishim. Noam.
We have a question about how we say that it's like there's a comparison. The pleasure that God receives from the service of Be'elim, it's even sweeter these sour delicacies.
Sour is sweet, yeah, sweet and sour.
It's even sweeter, sort of better.
He doesn't say over there necessarily, but in one can infer that there's a more sophisticated taste. In other words, a baby likes candy, but like to appreciate like a fine wine, you have to be sort of a connoisseur. So I mean, there is a type of different pleasure and potentially greater pleasure. But yeah.
My question is that the way I read the Tanya doesn't seem to say that that's a greater pleasure. It just says there are 2 different
right.
pleasures. It doesn't say that one is better than the other.
True, but if you think about it, what's the notion of? That's why I said it doesn't say it in there, but I think it is implied, and it's also strongly implied in other areas where it says that a Baal Tshuva stands in a place where a tzaddik cannot stand for the same reason, right? Why? Because the tzaddik can't really make a dir b'tachtonim for Hashem, which is nishava kadosh baruch lios lo yisbarach dir b'tachtonim. It is his true desire, and the tzaddik is sort of only able to do that by proxy. He can make you into a Baal Tshuva, but he can't himself really so simply become a Baal Tshuva as a regular person who has sin and comes back from. So you're right. The Tanya does not say that outright, but I do believe it's sort of, it is called the Sefer Shel Beinanim for a reason. The Sefer Shel Tzadikim was burned, so we don't really know what's in store for us over there. But yeah.
The question is that, is there a difference between, let's say, like they don't drink milk from a non-Jewish mother because it's like it tasted bad, that is a bad spiritual effect to it? We're saying with this multiple there's no such thing as that. It like actually becomes the actual plate that falls into the food that becomes actually fully kosher with no bad spiritual.
Depending on the rules of Tairuvis, not everything is so simply nullified. But yeah, if you take a drop of milk and you drop it into a pot of 60, right? By accident, right? There's a lot of I said there's a lot of klalim. It's not but fine, whatever it is, it can become that which would have been usher, right? You have 61 now, right? You didn't have 61 before. You had 60, so you have more permissible food because of some kind of an Easter, which became part of the mutter. It's the same idea that when Hashem has a dir b'tachtonim, right? Before he had a world which was spiritual up there, and it was like sort of corporal and lacking spirituality down here. When you make a dir b'tachtonim, he like added, as it were, a greater arena of kedusha that didn't exist before, like a Baal Tshuva, right? Okay. It's you mean human milk?
I don't know.
It's usher for different reasons, but it's yeah. So going on to the third point of this quality of the 60 days, right? Od ve'ikar, and the Rabbi says this is the main of the 3 points. Al yido, through this second month of Adar, nice hashleimus de kol chatshei alavana shmishtavim l'shnas hachama. Like we mentioned before, this sort of creates a equality with the solar calendar, and that itself sort of opens up a reminder of messianic times. Because it says, Hayaor halavana ka'or hachama, in the days of the future will return to the Gan Eden reality of the moon, where it says the light of the moon will be like the light of the sun, Shivasayim kor Shivas Yamim, which the whole business over there will be 7 times greater than the 7 days of creation. In other words, the whole light of godliness will be emerging in an infinitely greater way when the moon does equal the sun. In other words, there's another way of saying when the physicality is able to also become spiritual, when the receiver, which starts off as like sort of a lowly entity, he becomes equal to the giver. So now you have a infinitely greater level of godliness, and this is all indicated in the month of Adar, right? As it says, "La'asid lavo k'shasidim lischadesh kamosa," that we too will be renewed, like the moon is renewed in this messianic fervor. So Adar, is this. All this is contained in this reason why its transformation made it not only equal to the other months and nullifying the negativity, but greater than all the other months, to the point that it's the happiest month. The kol zeh mudgash yosef b'kaviyah shanazu. Okay, I told you this is a nun beis sicha, so we're sort of living in 1992 with the Rabbi, and he's dialing us into the particulars of that year, which don't necessarily apply to this year. First of all, it's not a leap year, and second of all, Rosh Chodesh falls on a different day, but the message is eternal. So let's see what the Rebbe was talking about at that time. He says it's connected with the way that it fell out in that year, that Rosh Chodesh Adar was on Yom Shlishi and Yom Revi'i, right? By the way, many times in that year, the Rebbe would do things like this. He would add in sort of nuances of what was going on exactly at that time. And even though you might say, well, it's not relevant to us now, what is relevant to us now is the way that we should learn Torah ourselves. That the Hashgacha Pratis, the Rebbe didn't mind putting into like the annals of Chassidus permanently a point which was relevant to specifically that time and that day. It's because the Rebbe was sort of showing us that we have to make Torah relevant to the specifics of what's taking place in our given circumstances in life. But in any case, what was special about Yom Shlishi and Yom Revi, Tuesday and Wednesday, in a leap year, when there's 2 Adars, he says like this, each one of those things points to this concept as well. That a Tuesday, where it says Huch Babo Kito, first of all, it's doubled, which takes us back to this concept of Kaflaim L'Tushia, that not only was the month doubled, but the day that the month was doubled was on a double day of Tuesday, right? Which the whole idea of a Tuesday in general, which is called a day which is doubly good. Why was the Tuesday called doubly good? Does anyone know why Tuesday, which is today, see, it's all relevant. Why does it have this concept of Huch Babo Kitov? Why does the Rashi explain to us in Parshas Bereshis that Tuesday was doubly good? Who knows? Why did it have 2 Kitovs? Yeah, it's good twice. Why?
Skip Monday, right?
It didn't say on Monday Kitov, right? So it had a Monday's Kitov inside of it. What's wrong with Monday? Division, right? Yom Rishon is Chesed, Yom Sheni is Gevura. Gevura is when Hashem separated the heavens, right? He made a Rakia, and so the whole idea of Gevura is that you don't see the Achdus of Hashem. So he says, all that which was Bilti Ritzoi, the Yom Sheni, the whole negativity of the second day, which what does the second day represent? The lowly world, Olam Hazeh, the Yetzer Hara, like the sourness of reality, which is like sort of slated for Yom Sheni, right? Because that day was Machloikas was created, which is the whole idea of the opposite of Achdus Hashem. But Achad Gamer Melechas Hasheni va'Achad leGamer Melechas Hayom. On Yom Shlishi is when you have these Hapcha, right? We realize actually, wait a second, the Machloikas was good, the wicked person was good, the world was good, the Shtus was good. It just had to be transformed into good. And so therefore the Yom Shlishi represents, just like Adar, it represents this transformation of negativity into good, which is indicated on that year's the fact that Rosh Chodesh Adar was on a Yom Shlishi. But what about Yom Revi? There was two Adars. Yom Revi, Shnei Ma'oros HaGedolim. What was created on the Wednesday? The 2 great luminaries, also indicating the same concept the Rebbe is trying to push over here, that this is the notion that the light of the moon will be like the light of the sun, greater than it was in the times of Bereshis, right? But Kamosha Haisa Koda Miuta, like it was before it was minimized, before Yom Sheni came and created Machloikis and sort of dimmed the light. So Yom Revi of every week is intended to remind us messianically of this return of the moon to its former glory. When it says Yas Elokim Es Shnei Moros Hagedolim, Va'od Ve'ikar. May I give you guys the second page? And furthermore, Tziruv Beis Hayami. So that's the third and the fourth. But what happens when you put the 2 together? That you have 2 days Rosh Chodesh of Adar Rishon, right? Which is Shlishi and Revi, Gimel and Dalit. Tziruf, the Gimel, V'Dalit, who God. So he says when you put Gimel and Dalit together, you get the word called God. It's interesting, this like form of learning of the Rebbe. He's not afraid of it. Just goes right into these little nuances. He said when you put Gimel and Dalit together, you get something called God. What does God mean? Not in English. What does God mean? There's a whole tribe called God. What does his name mean? Perush Mazel Tov. It means Mazel Tov. The word God means Mazel Tov. Shebezet, yeah. Shebezet mudgash od yoser in the bari b'takiv mazle. So when you have a Rosh Chodesh Adar, whose Inyan of Adar is that its Mazel is Tov, and it comes out in Gimel and Dalet, and it spells Mazel Tov. He's trying to point out that this is like sort of how we should see the world. Again, it kind of sounds like frivolous in a sense. If you're not realizing that it's a Nasi Ador that's speaking to you, you could just think like some Shlomo over there is taking notes on his paper. They're just trying to put ideas together. But this is the way the Rebbe wants us to, the Baal Shem Tov of our generation wants us to see the reality. Everything that's in this is coming out of every detail. So he says this also is the Inyan of the month of Adar, which is the Inyan of Mazel Tov. We already said it has a strong Mazel. And this number 3 plus 4, which is Mazel Tov, also of course spells 7, which is another reference to Moshe's birth on the 7th of Adar. If you take the Gimel and the Dalet, you put them together, you get 7. Hainu, and he's not done. This is just like the beginning of this whole contraption that he's building here. He says the latest Moshe b'Shiv ba'Adar, the birth of Moshe on the 7th of Adar specifically, Po'elis his gavrus hamazal. That's what created the mazel tov of Adar. In other words, it wasn't for the 7th of Adar. There is no such thing as a mazel tov of Adar. So when you have the gimel and dal together, it creates 7. It's showing you and highlighting this notion of what happened on the 7th of Adar, where it created a strong mazel of this month. In the whole month of Adar, but kol chodesh Adar, shenichlal bebeis hayamin derosh chodesh, which are the both months of Adar, are included in these 2 days of Gimel and Daled, right? One was for the 1 month, one was for the 2nd month, which spells God, Mazel Tov, Bari, V'Takif. Okay. Just getting warmed up over here. But everyone's following? He's basically trying to say that the notion of Adar, which is this kaflaim l'tushia and this his hapchus of darkness to light, it's like you see it everywhere. Yeah. Yeah.
On the Haftorah of Rosh Chodesh, we study about Shaul and Yonasan, and they're in the midst of a Rosh Chodesh. And the whole discussion revolves around David's demise. Will it be around this?
The truth is, just to be more exact, that's when it's Erev Rosh Chodesh, that Haftorah. Okay.
So I'm asking if the rabbi knows if that was Rosh Chodesh, what month was that Rosh Chodesh of the incident of Yonasan and David?
We'll look into that. I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah.
Sorry. But it was a 2-day.
Not
Discussing whether David will be there the first day, or whether it will be there the second day, or whether Rosh Chodesh.
that. I don't know either. I have to look because he's saying Machar Chodesh. Tomorrow's Chodesh. Okay. Sorry, that's a detail out of the scope of this discussion.
As per direction.
Hey, Yesh Lavar Tochina Indian these Gavrus Mazlam Shal Yisrael. Let's get deeper into the concept of what it means to have their mazel, the Jewish people, be strengthened because of the birth of Moshe, Mitzad latest Moshe, B'chodesh Adar, B'omek Yosef. Let's look into it a little bit deeper. Mazel the Yisrael. What is the mazel, the Jewish people, that gets strengthened exactly? It refers to Kai al Shoresh HaNeshama L'mayla. Our mazel, this is already more general information, our mazel is connected with the source of our soul above. Ki Yadua, as it's known. The descent of the soul down below to enter into a body. It's not the whole soul, right? It's just a little ray of the soul. Most of the soul stays above, right? A tiny little ray actually winds up squeezing into your body like a little exhaust of the soul, a very tiny part of it. And the general essence of the soul, which is called the mazel, remains above. The main essential source of the soul remains above. And that is what is called the mazel. And we see that in the Gemara, different examples, Adam the Islay Mazla, right? In other words, it says when a person is sleeping, he's chayev in damages, right? Unlike an animal, because a person has a mazel, which means even when you're sleeping, there's sort of part of you which is still really aware to some degree, because the most of your soul is not even in your body to begin with. You have this sort of hovering mazel that's guiding us. If you're like, yeah. No. Oh, kill somebody while you're sleeping? I don't think you're chayiv misa, but you're chayiv mamun. V'akol tului b'mazel, right? Everything depends on this mazel of man. Melashon nozel. Now, what does the word mazel tov actually mean? Good flow, right? The word, when someone has a little drippy nose, they call it a nazila, right? To drip is called nazila, and therefore the word mazel tov, even though we translate it as luck, which is kind of a funny translation, it really doesn't mean that at all. It means that you're having a drip, a good drip. What's the idea of having a good drip? Why do we call that good luck? Because when a strong drip comes out of the essence of your soul, things go your way. Just like we said, that like all of a sudden the month will just, even though it's not really looking to go your way, it gets schlepped your way. Or the day of that you're born on, suddenly it could have been a mazel that's not necessarily going your way, but it gets schlepped your way. But when you have a strong drip, it's the source from which all influence and life itself comes flowing out. This is called the mazel of the neshama. And this, what it says in Chazal, wait a second, we have a mazel? Doesn't it say ein mazel li Yisrael? The whole idea, there's literally a statement which says ein mazel li Yisrael. how do we put these two ideas together? We just said we have this mazel, it's the source of our soul. So when it says ein mazel Yisrael, what does that usually mean? It means that every nation has a mazel which governs it, right? Literally, like a ministering angel and a certain constellation which is determining its strength, its weaknesses, its ups, its downs. They're governed by the mazalos, which is essentially the stars. And it says, Ein Mazel Yisrael. We don't have one of those because it's referring to the mazalos, hasarim, bakochavim. These are like the angelic forces of the ministering angels and the stars, asher chalak l'kol ha'amim, which Hashem distributed to the goyim, not to us. So we don't have a mazel. Shisrael hem l'maylim mazalu seilu. We don't have a mazel because we're above all that. We're not affected by the causes of nature. It says ner neshama nishmas havaya. The soul of man is connected with the candle of havaya yudke vavke, whereas the rest of the world is an Indian of Elohim. So we are not under Elohim as gematria hateva, nature. So we're not governed by the nature of the world. On the contrary, the nature of the soul governs the nature of the world. And therefore it says we don't have a mazel. Aval gam Yisrael yesh mazel. But hello, there's another mazel that we're not talking about those kinds of mazalos. Not the Elohim level mazels. We're talking about Yisrael has a mazel on a whole other dimension. Adarabah, hamazel Yisrael hu naile yoseh be'eino ruch mishara mazalos. Our mazel is infinitely more superior in quality than all the mazalos, which is the mamish forces of nature of heavens and earth. Ki hamazel shelahem hu b'chinas ayin. And why? Because our mazel comes from a level called ayin as opposed to yesh. Right? In other words, it says, Beruach piv kol tzva'am. Hashem created the world with his breath, right? With his mouth, with his speech. And basically what is creating the speech itself? So all things in creation, all the hosts of heavens, they're basically an aspect of speech, a thing. It's already a matzias. The yidden, the neshamas, come from a place called the ayin, which is like pre-cognitive reality of Hashem. Al derech, like it says, v'achachma me'ayin timatzeh, right? Like the phrase says that chochma comes from nowhere, which means that chochma, which a chochma, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, is essentially sort of in a certain sense, the essence of the godly soul. It says that the ruach shtus, for example, the spirit of folly, which is our yetzer hara and our animal soul, it can confound us, it can confuse us, it can schlep us here and there until it comes to this impervious reality of a yid, which is the chokhmah of your soul. And why is the chokhmah of your soul sort of where the buck stops? Because chokhmah is a kli that holds the Or Ein Sof. And inside of that place, the shtusim cannot cover it over. Right? If it would emerge, what makes it emerge? Certain tests that come before us, which we're like brought face to face with the reality. If we continue down this foolish way, we can't call ourselves a yid anymore, whatever, as see over there. But the point is, when you would come face to face with this source of your soul, it's the chokhmah of your neshama, and inside of it is God Almighty himself. This is what we say, chokhmah me'ayin timatzeh. This level of chokhmah is found from this place called ayin. It's not part of creation. It's part of elukus. And the mazel of a yid is called the mazel called ayin. It's something beyond all of creation. Ein ayin she'enu musag, which means, why do we call it ayin? Because it's completely incomprehensible. Right? All things in creation have a size, a shape. They're measurable. If you don't want to say that they're the size of the whole universe, it's still measurable. Whereas the ayin of the neshama is immeasurable. And this is our mazel. And this is actually what makes a Jew a Jew. What is sort of our unique quality is that we have the ability to not be very easily. In other words, we would forfeit our lives involuntarily if a certain test came to us where God required us to basically give our lives for Hashem. It's called Mesiras Nefesh. Where do you get such a quality, right? We distinguish this in many places between the, so to speak, Mesiras Nefesh of the Goyim, where they're also seemingly willing to strap bombs on themselves and kill themselves. But why? Because they get 70 virgins. That's why. Or they get paid by U.S. aid. I don't know. They get paid, right? But the point is, there's money in it for them. It's not mamish selfless, and it's not really involuntary. It's not like a knee-jerk reaction that their soul cannot do anything but sacrifice itself to Hashem, because it's not a thing. It's just elokus. So this quality, we have a mazel, is what makes you Jewish. It's what makes you have this Shema Yisrael quality that you have Mesiras Nefesh, and it's unique to the Jewish soul. The Inyan Zeh Mudgash, timing is over. We'll Mudgash this tomorrow. Please pass them back in. Just a second one if you